Good morning, and you're all very welcome to this morning's webinar. The webinar is entitled Innovation in FinTech Landscape. My name is Paul Clancy. I'm CEO of the London Dairy Chamber, and we're delighted that so many of you could join us today. I'm really looking forward to our session this morning, and on behalf of the Chamber, I would like to welcome JohnAndy, Bonar, Michael Margey of FinTech Learning Labs, and Peter Barber of Allstate NI, who together will be outlining the new Masters in Innovation in FinTech, its structure and delivery, the LYIT mission and profile, and finally a case study from the FinTech Learning Labs. You have the option to text questions as we go through the webinar via the text icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavour to answer those questions as we pass through the actual webinar. If you have any questions that aren't answered, we'll collate those and we'll try and get back to you afterwards. So before we make a start, can I ask you to put your microphones on mute? This will ensure minimum interference. And Michael, if it's okay, maybe I'll pass over to you. I think you're going to share a presentation to take us through the first section of the webinar. And many thanks again for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks to Dairy Chamber for having us here today to get the opportunity to discuss with you about the development of a new Masters in Innovation in FinTech in the Northwest, and also a larger initiative around FinTech Learning Labs, which is a partnership and collaboration between industry, Allstate, Optum, and Primerica, and LYIT. So just conscious of time, what I'm going to do now is run a screen share here, and get that up and running to take you through the PowerPoint presentation. So everybody should be able to see that now. And really just to kick off with the first slide, if you can see that, work my way through that. Actually, I'm just going to escape out of that for a second. I have an easier way of doing it. I think I might. Can everybody see it okay in that format? Paul, is that okay for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I think I'll do it that way. I'll take the transitions out of it.
That's fine.
It's still big enough on everybody's screen to see there, is it? Yeah?
Yes, indeed. Yes, perfect.
Okay, so the structure of the presentation really is two parts. I suppose a little bit counterintuitive that we're just going in straight away with the master's program and the structure of it, and then to do some Q&A around that area. And on the second part then is really looking at the context, a little bit of an introduction to LYIT, Letterkenny Institute of Technology, some discussion around the Northwest City region and collaboration between higher education and industry, and then a profile of the business school summary level in terms of being an industry partner, and then to move on to a manifestation of all of those three previous parts in terms of FinTech Learning Labs and what we hope to do and achieve in that there. And it's also a useful model to look at for further industry collaboration. So just moving on then, really it's into the MSc and the innovation in FinTech. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before we actually get into the master's program. And the first question I ask you to give consideration to for a couple of minutes is, how ready are you for tomorrow? And is your rate of learning greater than or equal to your rate of change? I mean, people talk about this in terms of fourth industrial revolution. People talk about, you know, everything getting faster and quicker, more innovations, technology appearing. And, you know, what happens if your rate of learning is not greater than or equal to the rate of change? And if that is happening or you're struggling, you're going to find it difficult to remain competitive in business. The other question we find in where we live in today is, where is the power of work? Is the power of work greater than the power of learning? And that might sound like confusing at the moment, but think about it for a little moment, which is, you know, are we always now being built for execution and efficiency, right? Get more and more and more and more done. And where is the scope for us to look at learning and innovation, or knowledge and innovation? Where are we going to get the space to do that now? And, you know, is the power of work much stronger than the power of learning? Because we also know now that learning is really, really important if we're to keep up with or be greater than the rate of change to maintain competitiveness. And one of the other questions I asked then is, you know, we all know about IQ, and, you know, more recently over the last 10 years, we heard a lot about EQ, emotional intelligence. And now, increasingly so, organizations are looking at their learning intelligence, how good they are at actually learning, and how good they are about creative intelligence, how good they are about actually being really, really creative. And I asked the question then, you know, do we see ourselves as developing a person? Are we developing as teams? Or how do you develop an organization that's a learning organization, that's a highly creative organization, and is innovative? And lastly, you know, all the things we do every day, are we prisoners of our own thinking? You know, maybe sometimes things we see in front of us are actually symptoms of more fundamental underlying problems, and that we're not actually getting at moving the real roadblocks out of the way, or actually being really, really creative. Are we being more adaptive and just getting by? Or what's the scope for us to be regenerative and to be really creative? And that's what our programs are about, is how do you build innovation capacity in organizations that are very busy? So when we move on now to the whole idea of this Masters in Innovation in FinTech, there really is three important parts. The first part is about competitiveness and upskilling, and it's really important because this program is, you know, all about employees. It's built for industry by industry, and it's a work-based learning program. So you won't get fresh graduates on this course who've just finished their degree. It's for people who are at work. The design of the course, it's very much, you know, a partnership built by enterprise for enterprise. So, you know, every bit of the syllabi, how we were going to deliver it, the different ways we were going to approach it, have all been in discussion with the key industry partners. And lastly, it really is about work-based learning. And it's about understanding your organization, seeing it differently, and developing deep smarts. It's not about surface learning. This really is about taking action and doing and committing to moving things forward. So just quickly then to move into the structure, you know, I could say that the structure has three stages to it. You know, the fundamentals, which is innovation and entrepreneurship in the FinTech sector, design thinking, and then FinTech itself, a better understanding of the financial services environment and the impact of emerging technologies that are coming, whether it's AI, whether it's cloud, whether it's big data, whatever it happens to be at the moment, blockchain, all the different technologies, and how we see the focus on the customer changing. For example, in the FinTech industry today, Fitbit is becoming a FinTech company. You know, Fitbit is becoming a payments platform. And once they're looking after your physical health and wealth, they're also going to try now and see what you're buying and paying and make suggestions around your financial health and wealth as well. In terms of enabling then, we look at three modules there, culture and communication and influencing in FinTech. We also move to the financial services regulation. And that's critically important because you're dealing with people's money and finances and that there, and regulation is a key enabler of facilitating innovation and change in how we deliver products that are to do with finance or insurance or health insurance or different areas there. Regulation will have a big impact on how you shape your innovation. The other bit is about inquiry and action. So that's one of the key elements about learning, and one of the key elements about taking action, and one of the key aspects about learning by taking action. And lastly, then it concludes then with a much more larger work-based learning research project. And this is in place of the traditional academic dissertation. So just moving on from that, you know, the delivery approach is that every module that you've seen on the screen before that was 10 credits. Each one of them will be delivered sequentially. So you do all of this module before you do the next module, etc., etc. They're worked on 8-week cycles. And there's really 4 stages. At the first day, you get the assignment. So it's very outcome focused. And it's prior to, we have here the face-to-face session, but in the COVID-19 era, that will have to be a virtual face-to-face session of block delivery over 2 days with guest speakers. And it's roughly around 6 hours a week contact in terms of the learning hours and the learning material that's there. The rest of the learning you do in your work environment, and then it's online again for a series of online learning for weeks 4, 5, and 6. And you've 2 weeks then to conclude your assignment, which you will have started in the first couple of weeks as well. So just on that note there, I'll finish and ask for any questions and answers. Any questions appearing?
Nothing there now, Michael, at the minute.
Okay, so I mean, you know, just to summarize, you know, what you have there there's 3 parts to the course: the fundamentals, the enabling modules, and the bigger research project at the end. The modules are delivered sequentially, so they don't run in parallel. So if we ran 2 modules sequentially, you would end up having to do 12 hours per week per contact, and that's not sustainable if you're also a full-time employee as well. So it's 1 module at a time on 8 weeks duration, and then the next one starts again. It's 6 hours per week in terms of contact, but again, they're flexibly delivered, so you could do it an hour before you come into work, at work. You could do it at your lunchtime. You could pick it up at your coffee for 30 minutes. If you have an iPad and a pair of headphones, you can get 30 minutes of one of our pre-recorded sessions. So it's pretty flexible in how you're going to be able to do it. So I'll just conclude on that bit, Paul, if there's no Q&A, and I'll move on then to the rest of the presentation, which looks at the larger context.
That's great, thanks.
Or do yourself, Paul, from looking at it, or anyone else there, was there anything came to your mind in terms of a question there?
Well, I do think the flexibility of it is amazing, because I think that's really what's needed in the current climate, and the fact that you can do it all virtually as well is a great asset. Yeah, for sure, that's fantastic.
Yeah, Paul, it was a big design consideration, which is, you know, if people were full-time employees, how can you design a program that's going to give them the flexibility to be able to dip in and dip out of this? Some of it will be live, and you know, if you've got flexible working hours and it happened to be on from 11 to 12, you can tune in and get the questions and get an engagement. But if not, that'll be recorded then, and you can pick it up later on in the evening, or it's just like a podcast or vcast. You can start it and stop it to suit yourself.
That's brilliant. Look, a question has come in from Andrew Jenkins there, Michael. Good morning. Thinking about the technology underpinnings of FinTech, for example, AI, ML, big data, cybersecurity, is that catered for?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking for there in the FinTech is the impact of the, you know, the 4th industrial revolution, the impact of the new technology. So, you know, it'll cover AI and big data analytics. It'll cover, you know, the impact of AR and VR in terms of customer interactions. You know, how is that going to work as well? It'll also cover distributed ledger technology. It'll also look at things strategically as well, because you've got to look at in terms of understanding now that Fitbit is becoming a payments delivery platform. Anybody who has a Fitbit device. So, you know, when you're looking about designing your services for customers, then you got to understand better how it's going to work for, you know, the millennials, but also the generation that are coming just after them now, and how you're going to engage with them. And, you know, that's a big difference from if you look at the old Fins and the big Fins of the world today, to the new FinTech startups that we see coming into the marketplace, to the big techs as well that are sitting out there. You know, how quickly can they switch on and move into the FinTech space? But at the end of the day, it's about the focus on the customer, focus on design thinking and innovation, but you've got to understand the technologies, their capabilities, their interactions between them, and the opportunities that they present, coupled with also understanding the regulatory environment as well, because that has a big impact on, you know, how you can actually provide your services to the customer.
And I think the thing that stuck for me from that presentation, Michael, was how ready are you for tomorrow? I think that question you've asked there, you know, are you prepared? If you're developing your innovation slower than actually what's happening around you, you're going backwards. And that's a critical part too, that you have to do a proper analysis on where you are.
Yeah, and it's to understand the speed of change, is to understand how change is manifesting itself. And, you know, part of the design ethos behind this program was to make T-shaped employees. So someone might be an expert in regulation, somebody might be an expert in AI, somebody might be an expert in cyber ops. You know, they've got that really long vertical, but this was to build a horizontal skill set on top of that, so that people could have a wider understanding of, you know, how you're going to drive innovation, you know, how you look at entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship within your organization, dealing with the cultural challenges that are there. You know, sometimes in the financial environment, you know, you get a culture that can be very risk adverse, you know, and how you're going to deal with the different cultural relationships between, if you're a large multinational organization, between where we are, say, in Ireland in our operations, and dealing with maybe headquarters that are in the States or somewhere else in the world. So understanding organizational culture and be able to influence that there, to be able to use language and vernacular, to be able to communicate as well, and to be able to change technology into business values or customer values. All of that takes the different types of modules that we have on this course.
Well, Michael, obviously getting down to the nitty gritty, the next question I had there was, how much are the fees for the MSc? So straight to the jugular question there. Do you have a cost?
Yeah, I mean, we have a cost on this here. Well, we also have a higher education fellowship on this here. JohnAndy, if you want to come in on that bit there, I mean, our fee structure on this here, I think, is 7750 in euros, but we're also providing a cross-border higher education professional ed scholarship, Andy?
Yeah, that's correct, of about 2,500 euros, Michael, per participant, in the interest of just sort of encouraging and recognizing the contribution that the employers have made to the development of the program.
Yeah, so if you look at that, your net cost position would be just over 5,000 euros. And if you split that into 2 financial years, it's about, you know, 2,500 euros plus in each financial year. You know, I would put forward that that represents exceptional value. I mean, yeah. We're going to, you know, the 2 days block delivery will have expert guest speakers on it as well. So, you know, you're getting a course, you're getting like what's like a mini conference for 2 days with guest speakers on it as well. So you're getting a lot in that package. And I'd say the other thing is, the most important thing actually on it is that it's not your traditional higher education format. It is completely focused on work-based learning. From the word go, when you start a module and you get an assignment, the assignment is actually based on your work environment, the organization that you work for. So you should be seeing really quick, tangible gains and value add when you go into your job the next week, when you're sitting in a meeting, when you're making an argument or a case or a value proposition for something. And several of our staff members as well have gone to Oxford, where we did a FinTech innovation course there. So we, you know, trying to learn from best practice that's out there as well, and the approaches that they adopted. Any other aspects of note?
There was just a question there. Sorry, Andy, I'll just jump in there. The regulatory environment, a great opportunity to bring awareness of UK FCA sandbox. I'm sure ROI have equivalent. That was just a comment. That
I mean, the regulatory environment is one that, you know, we'll have to be flexible in how we interpret that. So, you know, depending on the cohort that we get, which, you know, we're assuming is, you know, well divided between NI and the South here as well, you know, we will bring in speakers to talk on those particular areas, and the legislation that's emerging or has emerged in recent years, and some of that legislation that has come into place, the regulatory regulation in the UK, for example, has been to position them as an innovation hotspot for FinTech. You know, so they're trying to get the regulatory environment correct. You also have to look at that in terms of data and personal data, and, you know, where your different operations will be from a global perspective, because there's implications for that there as well, in terms of where you actually store data, who it belongs to, and how you analyze it. So it's a complicated space, but it's one you have to pay attention to.
Sorry, JohnAndy, you were going to jump in there. Sorry, I cut across you there. You'd like to add anything?
No, not at all. No,
Okay.
very happy, Paul. Thank you.
That's great. Okay. Well, Michael, do you want to move on through the presentation then? I think we've covered off the questions
that's
and
fine.
answers
And
there.
if other questions come to mind, we can pick them up in the
Certainly.
beginning. So the next really part of the presentation is just looking at the LYIT, probably an introduction for us as an organization and our mission and role. And JohnAndy, if you want to kick off on that there, introduce JohnAndy Bonar, our Vice President for Research, Equality and External Affairs, and leads out on a lot of strategic initiatives for LYIT. And JohnAndy, I can just walk through the slides.
Thanks, Michael.
It's the one opportunity I might be able to control him. I now have control of the slides that he's meant to be speaking about.
Yes, that's very worrying, Michael. So in the first instance, thank you very much. I just want to acknowledge at the outset the leadership of Paul and Anna and the Chamber prior to, but more particularly recently through the pandemic and the range and suite of initiatives that they've launched. I think it's deserving of comment and commendation. And also, I'd like to particularly at the outset acknowledge the role of Peter, Aidan, John Healy, and all of the team in Allstate. As Michael was at pains to point out, this is very much a program designed by employers for employers. So it's really been a very, very exciting, very exhilarating journey of development, collaboration, and you know, the development of what we regard as a very unique and novel initiative. I suppose at the outset as well, I should say Letterkenny Institute of Technology will be 50 years old next year, and I'm here for 30 years. Now, I don't quite know what that suggests, but maybe it's time for me to think about moving on. We have 4,500 students, 3,300 generally physically present in some capacity, and about 1,200 in a part-time capacity. And we have 350 staff. I think significantly as well, over the last 3 years, the average number of graduates coming through with their various degrees, masters, PhDs are of the order of 1,200. So we see ourselves very much as a sort of a key element in the emerging and very rapidly developing entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem across the Northwest City region. And we're very passionate about that. Letterkenny Institute of Technology is on a trajectory to becoming a technological university, and we're also working extremely hard with our very close partners in the University of Ulster, Northwest Regional College, and our own ETB here in Donegal to develop really, I suppose, a partnership with employers across the region and to position the cluster and the higher education as a talent development partner for all of these initiatives. So that's essentially where we're coming from. We very much see ourselves in the spirit of a civic university, which at its core is that we're not just of this wonderful region, but we're proactively here for this very, very interesting region that we're extremely passionate about. So in my many years of experience here at LYIT, I have to say that the development of the FinTech Learning Labs and the collaboration with our colleagues in Allstate, Primerica, Optum, has been one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting initiatives that I've had the pleasure of being involved in. So we're very much here but particularly for the region, very, very much looking forward to supporting Peter and the team in Allstate and indeed other employers across the rapidly developing fintech sector. And as you'll see there in our strategic plan, which was launched at the end of last year, we're all about the development of the Northwest region in the first instance through research, innovation and enterprise, working towards technological university status. That's because as these very, very significant employers in our region move up the value chain, we need to be there on their shoulder to ensure that they've got access to all of the multiple skills and talent that they require. We're very interested in the whole area of evolving disruptive technologies, and we want to lead out proactively on the development of our established relationships and strengths in cross-border engagement. So I'm just acutely conscious that of people's time, but I just want to mention finally that we're at a stage of very significant investment and ambition to continue to serve the region. We've got a new public-private partnership building, which we hope to have planning for in the first quarter of next year. That's of the order of 20 million here on our campus. We're rapidly developing the School of Tourism, which is based in Killybegs. We've just invested €660,000 before the summer in the development of research facilities at CoLab, our incubation centre. We're developing an innovation centre in our Killybegs campus for the ocean, essentially for the marine and maritime environment. And Michael in particular is leading out very strongly for us around the development, a very ambitious regional development of sports facilities on our campus here in Letterkenny. So we're ambitious for the region and very proud to be a small part and contributor to the development of this very interesting region. So that's my perspective, Paul. I'm just conscious of people's time. Very happy to take any questions that colleagues will have, but very anxious to leave appropriate time for Peter as our key partner to articulate from an employer's perspective the significance of the developments.
That's brilliant, JohnAndy. Thank you very much for that.
I'll pick up again, Paul.
Yeah, sure.
On the School of Business,
Yeah.
A little profile on that there. I'll go through this pretty quickly, but I think some of this is just an introduction that people get to know us and know a little bit more about us other than LYIT and see a little bit what's under the hood. So in terms of a business school, you know, we've about 1,700 students, sometimes 1,800 students. Our structure is we're built into kind of 3 departments around the area of business and enterprise, law and governance, design and creative media, also as retail studies in there. They're not necessarily the name of the departments, but that's the areas they're in. Just to give you some headlines, 40% of our students are lifelong learning, 22% of our students are mature, about 10 to 12% of our students are postgraduate students. In terms of business school, that's quite a high percentage. 5% would be Erasmus or fee paying. In terms of School of Business faculty, we've about 8 staff between managers or academic heads and senior lecturers, 10 professional support staff. We've a part-time faculty that ranges between 10 to 20, depending on how we have to scale up and down, a full-time faculty of about 60. And in the last 5 years, we've taken on a lot of development in terms of PhD and doctoral studies and research. About 25, you know, getting closer to 50% of our faculty now are all at doctoral level. Just to move on, a big interest for a business school, and we position ourselves as an entrepreneurial business school. It's much more than degrees, and it's much more than just producing your primary degrees. It's how you engage industries, how you design programs for industry. And we will put forward ourselves, you know, if I had 6 aspects to outline us as a business school, I'd say we're really focused on work-based learning and action learning. We've put ourselves forward to be highly responsive to industry, and also in terms of flexible design and delivery. I haven't met a situation where we haven't been able to meet the needs of industry in terms of delivery, in terms of program curriculum, in terms of output to industry, and in terms of delivering value add, a strong value proposition to industry. Industry knowledge is really important for us. We spend a lot of time when we're developing a partnership with an industry sector of getting to know that industry sector and the key employers in that area in terms of what they want. If we don't listen continuously, so it's not just something you do at the beginning to develop a program, it's a partnership, it's going to fall apart. And you know what, if somebody raises a really good hurdle, then we've got to see how we get over it, because it's there for a really good reason and it needs to meet the needs of industry. Innovation, design thinking, you know, is an area we've put a lot of interest in over the last 5 years. We've even developed our own methodologies, our own methodware in terms of our own processes. We've one of them there called the wallpaper process by a guy called Porrick Lynch, and another one called the unique process by Krona and Tina Patton. And these are our own method, where our own proprietary methodologies for promoting innovation in organizations. Relationship management with industry is key, and a really strong parity of esteem between academic knowledge and practical wisdom. So, you know, we don't have any primacy that academic knowledge is the way to move everything forward. It really is about applying it in industry. And really the last slide for me is we're really focused in terms of engaging industry, in terms of being an entrepreneurial business school, of how do we produce pervasive innovation in organizations in an ecosystem? How are we working in partnership externally? And there's a few things that we've probably learned along the way. In terms of developing learning organizations and making them more competitive, you have to look at that about the rate of change and the rate of learning. So we know the rate of learning is really important. You have to find a way that the power of work isn't bigger than the power of learning. And how do you fit that into organizations? And we also figured out as well that there was a disconnect sometimes between HR development, where you were able to send people on courses and their CVs got bigger. But in terms of OD or organizational development, the organization wasn't getting the value add or the payoff from that. So that was, I remember when we first started our talks off with industry in developing these types of programs, that was one of the challenges they put down. How can you ensure that we're going to get organizational development? How are you going to ensure that we're going to get organizational value add? And it's not about somebody passing exams, getting a degree to hang, or a master's degree to hang on their wall and improving their CV. So it really is about three aspects. It's about learning based on action, it's about promoting innovation, and it's about bringing design thinking into play. And a really big important part is our social capital, our professional capital, our trust capital with our employers and our partners. They're the key ingredients to producing an entrepreneurial business school or an entrepreneurial university. Future directions for us are, you know, yeah, we're in a position of being a supplier for talent acquisition in terms of producing fresh graduates, but in the future we see ourselves much more getting closer to industry and being a talent development partner. This will result in increased development of industry-focused programs in real partnership with industry, increased development of sustainable work-based learning programs at undergraduate and postgraduate level. We also, future direction, we hope to have our submission of our professional doctorate program by the end of this year, 2020. And also our submission for the technological university would be at the end of this year, 2020 as well. So that's just a kind of an overshot of, you know, our thinking behind how we engage industry, our DNA and our personality, and where we see ourselves in the future. I'll just skip a few slides here now to move into FinTech Learning Labs. And FinTech Learning Labs is a manifestation of how we position ourselves as a business school, and the business school's positioning is based on a manifestation out of LYT's mission, which is to be involved in an ecosystem, to be a partner to industry and deliver programs that deliver real value. And I suppose I'll hand it over to Peter now, who's been our leading partner in terms of how we manage to pull all this together. And I'll just open it over to you, Peter, as the industry partner, to give your understanding of this, and then we can feed in the slides after that then, if that's okay.
No problem, Michael. And I'm not going to touch on any details of the slides because I think a lot of that's been already covered. You know, but there's a couple of key drivers, certainly from our perspective from an Allstate, is how do we encourage partnerships with the education institutes that means we're agile in responding to the changes in the business. You know, as Michael touched on in one of his slides earlier, everything is changing so fast, but our learning isn't catching up with the change. You know, so what we were looking to, and in the initial conversations, is explore, you know, how can we build out a master's program which is going to respond to our needs rather than waiting for several years for a curriculum change to come through. But the other part of it was, you know, Allstate's been on, you know, a really strong journey over the last 20 years within Northern Ireland. You know, we started out, to be fair, doing legacy mainframe development, a small cohort of people, and now at this stage we've got 2,300 people and getting more and more involved in the decision making within the wider Allstate company. but that also presents us with a gap in our education and challenges in the growth of them top level leaders. So I know we talk about and invest a hell of a lot in growing the talent pools from the bottom, but what really excited us about this program, it was enabling us to scale our leaders to take them to the next level. We want to move away from all the decisions being driven by the US and have the decision makers and the people that's actually driving the strategic direction of the company sitting in Northern Ireland. That was one element of it. Another key element, which is, to be fair, is probably a selfish aspect, from us, is the growth of Northwest region. If you look at FinTech and the Australia as a whole, there's 40,000 people employed in FinTech in Northern Ireland. There's nearly 50,000 employed in the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is known globally as a FinTech leader and a RegTech leader, but we wanted to make sure that the Northwest is not getting left behind in those conversations. And the best way to ensure our voice is heard is to use the collaboration from the partners that we have and the companies based within the Northwest on both sides of the border. Now, we've been talking, to be honest with you, for years about this digital corridor between Derry and Letterkenny, but we haven't been really investing in the collaboration to make that digital corridor a reality. So what we really wanted to do, as I said, is strengthen the relationships between the FinTech companies within Derry and Letterkenny and in Strabane, and really help shape the direction and maximize the potential and the opportunities for the Northwest region as a whole. So I know certainly from an Allstate perspective, we're really excited about the Masters program because it helps take our leaders to the next level, but we're also equally excited about the collaboration opportunities that this presents with the companies that we're partnering with. So Michael, again, I know you probably want to touch on a few things on the slides. I'll let you continue on.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, that was a really good point there you were making, that, while it was about, the rate of learning and FinTech changing that quickly, and, getting the leaders with the skill set and the bandwidth to see things in that there. But the other aspect was, how, we got better at collaborating, and that whole conversation that has started off, and we've built machinery around, how we get that relationship to work with industry, with yourselves, with higher ed. And I think that, we have a better understanding of what industry needs, the turnaround times, etc. You have a better understanding of where we're coming from as well. And that can only serve us well into the future, because the future is collaboration. The future is about an ecosystem. The future is about the Northwest City region and how we can work together. And LYT is a good partner and good collaborator. And, while we might be a catalyst on the higher education side for this year, we're not proprietary on this here. And, in terms of the greater scheme of things, JohnAndy, in terms of the higher and further ed education partnership and cluster, this can expand. But at the moment, you have to start somewhere to get things going. So some of the ideas behind the value proposition.
Michael, just before you pop on there, I just have a question that came in there just in terms of, great to hear about the collaboration between academia and industry. Are there other programs in the pipeline being developed as a result of this type of collaboration?
Yeah, I can answer that a couple of ways, because when you look at the needs analysis, there was like 11 areas. And, if you really want to be a really good partner, you've got to understand the business, you got to understand the different areas that are involved, and you need to start seeing them from the inside out from an industry perspective. So we did some mapping to say, there was 11 areas, and you can see there's an area here about entrepreneurship and innovations in FinTech and design thinking. That's where that master's course maps onto. And these other areas then, I think we committed to 3 pilot program areas that we're looking to develop. AI is one of them as well. And the other one is to do with in the security area. So, that's how it started off. The first wave is 3 programs, and there's other ones to come then, obviously, if the first ones prove successful. And part of the value proposition then, Paul, was, when we tried to distill that was, what was the needs analysis, what could we deliver? So some of it came out this way: front of curve, so you need to be at the front of the curve. We need to be responsive. We need speed in terms of, you know, what these developments are, that we get them into our curriculum and understand how it works. We needed to reach out in terms of our social and professional capital between academia and industry to get the best minds in FinTech. Who were they out there that were at world-class or best practice level to feed them into the programs that we have? We had to look at, you know, improving the knowledge assets that the organizations had. So it was enhanced talent development. And there's a little bit around that, around, you know, the experts that you have in your organization, but the value add from an innovation perspective. And, you know, if you give them the right tool sets, you can get huge multipliers on that there. It had the flexible delivery. You know, we're offering globally recognized qualifications and lifelong learning pathways, but again, all this is embedded in a work-based learning environment. The context is really important here. It's real world expertise pool that we're looking to develop, designed for the world of work. It's a FinTech focused relationship management. So, you know, from our organization, we had to put a person just specifically focused on FinTech, and they need to know FinTech inside out and to be able to have those conversations with industry. And it was a strategic understanding from the employers about where they felt FinTech was going, because that had to underpin the design or set the compass for what we were doing. And then obviously, as we're moving into more and more niche areas in a periphery such as the Northwest here, we have to ensure that we have program viability. And, you know, it's to provide a counterbalance to the argument that, you know, we always have to go to Dublin or to Belfast to do this course or that course, and it's to provide it here. And, you know, we have a huge FinTech cluster here in the Northwest, and, you know, we need to be developing the relationship and relationship infrastructure around that to support the collaboration with higher education, because that has to be hinged at the hip for us to make this work. Does that answer that question? Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Michael. Thanks very much.
And then the other aspect, the other slide I'll just move on to here, is the whole aspect of it. You know, it's online predominantly with some face-to-face, but in the COVID-19 era, that face-to-face will have to be virtual. And it's to be able to take it at work, at home, on the go, or face-to-face. So it was to have an agile and flexible approach to delivering the learning, and to differentiate the learning also from training. And that's because in higher education, the big thing that we come in is that we assess learning. We assess what level the learning has happened at, and we've QA, good quality assurance around that, to test and check that the learning has actually happened, and at depth and at master's level. So that really concludes that bit on the FinTech Learning Labs. So I think we've unpacked everything. Paul, if there's more questions or answers.
Yes, I have another question here. It's great to hear about the collaboration between academia and industry. Oh yeah, sorry. Is the MSc open to participants from all over NI and ROI?
Absolutely. I think that the only point I would make is it really is for people in the FinTech or FinTech related sectors. We run another program in innovation and leadership, and that's recruiting for a January start, and it's much more generic. But this one here is context focused on FinTech or FinTech related areas, but it is for NI or ROI, doesn't matter.
Brilliant, brilliant. Michael, have you covered off your presentations now? You're happy enough you've covered off the content that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think so. If any of my collaborators on the panel have anything they want to add as well, in case I missed something.
No, I think, Michael, you pretty much covered it. You know, but again, you know, certainly from an Allstate perspective, you know, one of the key questions to us is, well, what's the value proposition from our perspective? You know, and as I said earlier, you know, irrespective of what journey your company's on in terms of your maturity and dealing with your partners, you know, we wanted to get our leaders to the next level. We wanted to be seen more and more as the decision makers within Allstate as a whole. You know, and certainly to be able to leverage that collaboration and the networks that you're going to gain through a master's program like this is going to be every much as valuable as the education will attain from it.
Brilliant. I just have a couple of summary points, if that's okay, if I can jump in there, guys. I think just, you know, taking a couple of notes as you were going through the presentation there, things came up like, how ready are you for tomorrow? I think it started off with that, Michael. We talked about the Northwest region. We talked about FinTech being a leader and a cluster being in the Northwest region. Collaboration was a huge word that was used over and over again in the Northwest region. Flexibility, agility, digital corridor, work-based learning, and meeting the needs of industry, and that listening to the industry and defining your courses and working in partnership to make sure it's relevant for industry so they can develop their people, and at senior level, not just at junior level. And sometimes we forget that you have to stay ahead of the curve. In order to do that, you have to invest in your people. And the other thing that you touched on, Peter, I think is a really interesting point, is decision makers, keep them local, because nobody knows better, I guess, than yourselves of what way you want to drive your business. And it's giving you the confidence and being able to sell those messages, in your case, probably to the US, but in even any business, I think if you can do that, you're on a winner. You want to control your own future as best you can with the right decisions. And again, I guess we learned today that this is the start of something much bigger. There's 3 programs in place: AI, security areas, and more to come downstream. And I think it was fantastic you talk about the Northwest region. This isn't just about Letterkenny. This is about the corridor. It's about the Northwest. It's about attracting employment here. It's creating jobs and wealth and keeping people in this region. When they finish college, we want to make sure they have jobs here. They're properly skilled, staying ahead of the curve to make sure we have the right skills base. So I must admit, I'm absolutely blown away with what's happening here between industry and yourselves there, Michael and JohnAndy. Brilliant work. Sure. Peter, thanks so much for joining us today. It's really been brilliant to see the industry aspect of it and what you're bringing to the table as well. And thanks so much for the contributors who asked the questions as well. I'm just going to take one final look here to see if there's any more questions.
And while you're doing that, Paul, I might add in, about the challenges out there for higher education to be responsive to industry. We keep reading this in different reports, and we're up for that, right? And what I would say is it takes shoe leather. It takes time to build up understandings on both sides. You have to engage, you have to have meetings. You need to spend the time doing that. This is an example of FinTech. We're open to doing it in other areas as well. And I think by working together, we have an incredibly powerful proposition. And Peter, you highlighted that point, and I said it as well. We are very focused that this has to, work where the rubber hits the road. It has to provide a value proposition to industry. It's not an end in itself that it's a master's degree. It's a means to an end, which is organizational value add. That's the acid test for us to judge if this is working. And collaboration is the theme. Northwest is the theme. And working together, we can do great things. And, we run joint master's courses with University of Ulster as well. So this collaboration can span out in loads of different areas. And if we do that, we have a really, really powerful proposition coming out of the Northwest.
And certainly we will be promoting that. I mean, we have the Minister for State for Northern Ireland joining us shortly, and we will be promoting these initiatives to let them know that the Northwest is open and ready for business, and we're delivering programs with real value. I think that was another message that came out of today. So just on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank the panel members, JohnAndy, Michael and Peter, for sharing this new and exciting development. And we will be sending out a recording of the webinar today to our contacts so that people who weren't able to join us today would be able to tap into it. So again, look, it's great that you support the Chamber. Thank you very much for your kind words, JohnAndy. Really appreciate that, and continued success. And we're here to support in any way we can as a Chamber. Brilliant session. Comment coming back in there. Well done, guys. Great session. So without further ado, I'd just like to say have a great day, have a great afternoon, and safe travels.
All right. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.